Okay, welcome back. I don't know about everybody else, but after this, I'm headed out to a restaurant for dinner. And for our final presentation, Braxton Boren of American University is going to explain why the restaurant I'm headed to is so loud and possibly what could be done about it. So take it away, Braxton.
Thank you so much. My name is Braxton Boren, and I gave a talk yesterday entitled "A Game Theory Model of the Lombard Effect in Public Spaces." This was occasioned by a time where I was in Princeton, New Jersey, and I was at a very unclear dinner party. Everyone was sitting in a row, and it was a very reflective room, and over time everyone began to speak very loudly, with the result that no one could be heard. And the host asked me, knowing that I studied acoustics, if we could all talk quieter, if we could hear each other better. And I said yes, but it's very unlikely you'll be able to do that. And in fact, that's what happened. Everyone would talk quietly, then they would get energized, and gradually they would get loud and loud and loud, and then the host would clink her glass, and everyone would be reminded to get quiet again. And they would do this, and then it would just cycle like this over and over, unless they had a conscious interruption. And the reason for this is called the Lombard effect. This is a well-known acoustic effect that's in humans and other mammals and other animals, which is the tendency to increase your vocal level in the presence of background noise. And this has been known since Etienne Lombard, a French scientist, discovered it in the early 20th century. There's been a lot that's been written about this from a sort of vocal and hearing science perspective, as well as in room acoustics, but we have this effect whereby if we all consciously decided to talk very quietly, we would actually be able to understand each other better. But because we're all sort of kind of wrangling with each other in the acoustic space, trying to get our voice a little bit up above the rest of the crowd. And since everyone does that, we end up continuing to increase in level until we reach a limiting factor, which is just the limits of the human voice, more or less. And there had been a lot written about the acoustics of cocktail parties in the 1950s and 60s. There were a lot of early papers in the Journal of the Acoustical Society of America based on this from a just sort of pure physics background. But since I was in Princeton when this happened, which is also the home of game theory, John von Neumann and John Nash of A Beautiful Mind fame, I thought that it made most sense to actually frame this as a collective action problem. Maybe the best known is the tragedy of the commons, whereby if you have a common field in British towns that people would tend to overgraze because they would send in their cattle to eat as much as they could, everyone is incentivized to take as much of the common as they can, and they don't take as good of care of it as if it were their own farmland. So I'm sort of using techniques from game theory. The closest model I'm actually using is one called the Unscrupulous Diner's Dilemma. This is maybe a multiple person version of the Prisoner's Dilemma, if you've heard of that. The basic idea is if we all go out to dinner and we split the tab, if I were paying by myself, I'd probably get something cheaper. But because you all are subsidizing me, I will actually order something more expensive, which I normally would not have been worthwhile for me to get. But because we're all incentivized to do that, then we end up actually paying quite a bit more. When you divide it by everyone, it's just the same as if I'd ordered the expensive meal, which is the very thing I didn't want to do. So, sparing you some of the math, I'm just formulating a very sort of a beginner, a game theory model of this, which is defining utility in these sort of economic versions. So the thing we're trying to optimize when we're in these noisy situations, and it as a function of the source level, how loud am I, and what is the noise level in the room, so S and N. And I'm defining it as a difference between some intelligibility function, which I use the speech transmission index, which is a mathematical index for room acoustic intelligibility, minus an effort function, E. This is a function of both the vocal effort and the sort of effort of being in a very noisy environment. And as we heard even in the previous talk, talking at a loud level can lead to bad health effects for your voice, and being around lots of noise has other stress and hearing-related health outcomes as well. So I don't need to get into all of the math behind this, but there are some interesting ways that this diverges from traditional sort of game theory, where a lot of these situations assumed no communication, whereas I identify this as a sort of iterated game theory situation where we're all constantly communicating, and it's as though if we all talk very quietly, in the prisoner's dilemma, when we're in different interrogation rooms, we are cut off from each other, and then you either stay loyal to me or you betray me. But in the case of the Lombard effect, if I start talking loud when we had all agreed to talk quietly, it's like you know instantly that I betrayed you, and you're incentivized to talk a little bit louder. So the equilibrium, or we call a Nash equilibrium, named for John Nash, is that everyone will talk louder. But there are possible solutions where we could get to different equilibria. So there is evidence that even though we can't overcome the Lombard effect just with our own attention, once we get sort of absorbed in the conversation, we're more likely to get much louder. But there is evidence that if we have constant visual feedback that can reduce the cognitive load of this situation, we can actually modulate our voice if everyone is doing it together and everyone is presented with this. So I outlined some different possibilities for the future, including if you had augmented reality glasses, for instance, this could give you could have something that would monitor your own level with a directional microphone and also give you constant visual feedback. We could theoretically reach a different equilibrium point where everyone is assisted by technology to maintain their level lower in these environments. Now, the traditional solutions to the tragedy of the commons are things like either you regulate it or you privatize it, which are kind of the solutions that we already have in room acoustics. We could regulate it by adding absorption, for instance, so this curtain over here or the rug on the floor, these are going to reduce the reflections in the room. So everyone still might be talking at the top of their voice, but the overall noise level will be slightly lower because we've absorbed more of that sound energy. Or we could privatize your conversation. This would be like a booth in a restaurant. If I have some barrier between you and the next door conversation, there will be less crossover, and your specific level will influence them less as a noise source. There are also a lot of newer hearing aids that have directional technology in them that will allow you to actually sync with your phone, and you can actually zoom in on different parts of a conversation. So this is something that currently is mainly just funded for people with hearing loss, but there are possibilities that someday we might all have sort of cybernetic hearing implants that could both protect our ears from noisy sources, but also allow us to zoom in different parts of the conversation so that we can focus more on who we're talking to and be less influenced by the noise around us. And of course, this kind of model, if we're trying to just define very clearly what it is we're optimizing when we're in these situations. We kind of all agree that they're not optimal, but I'm trying to be more specific about what the pluses and minuses of it are. Obviously, if we have a full VR environment where everything is completely virtual, then you might think, well, let's just make it completely silent. But we don't want that either, actually. Obviously, we get some energy from being in a lively environment. The idea of a cocktail party, you don't want a party that's completely quiet, and the key is, try to find the right amount of energy. And so I put forward some different ideas for this, but I'm still looking in the perceptual literature for the right curve for that effort function, and there are some different final equilibria you can end up at, depending on how you define that. But those are a lot of the directions that this is going in right now, and I'd be happy to take anybody's questions if you have time for it.
Well, thank you, Braxton. I'll start us off with a question. So I find in a lot of restaurants there's kind of a base level of noise from music that they're playing. Is that kind of a factor in these kind of situations?
Yeah, well, often restaurants will modulate their music according to what is going on. So anecdotally, you hear that they will change the tempo based on trying to turn over customers, or in a slow time, they might play more slow music. But the base level of noise will also affect the level of conversation subconsciously through the Lombard effect in noisy restaurants. There have been a lot of pieces in the news about how restaurants are getting noisier. A lot of that is just through the sort of visual aesthetic, the so-called millennial look of hardwood floors and lots of exposed walls and things like that, which are just more reflective. But of course, that does have a sort of payoff in the final Lombard effect influenced noise profile that gets induced based on the number of people in there and the noise contribution from each conversation.
Okay. And, Carrie, you want to go? Oh, I mine might be a good last question, but I was wondering if you have any tips or tricks for anyone who's trying to understand a conversation in a room like that.
Yeah, well, so interestingly, in the dinner party, I described actually my conversation partner. He used all his effort to keep talking quietly, with the result that I had no idea what he said the entire evening. But he didn't contribute that much to the noise. But certainly, visual cues, being able to see someone's lips actually helps with speech intelligibility. So using context whenever possible, and trying to even over-articulate your own voice may be a way that you could actually, convey more what you're talking about, obviously hand gestures and things like that, without increasing your level. But as I said, this is a subconscious effect, so it's very difficult for you to actually inhibit it without constant visual feedback, as far as we know from the experiments that have been done so far.
I actually have a question on your equation.
Okay.
But the background is I have a friend who has hearing loss, and she uses apps on her phone
Yeah.
to, dictate speech into text. But they fail when you're in a crowded environment because of the Lombard thing. It'll just flash background noise at her.
Yeah.
So your intelligibility at the speaker's position, does that catalog, repertoire, input account for intelligibility of not just human speech, but maybe intelligibility of a digital application or a digital device, where you could see how big of a difference is for that phone to work for her compared to someone who is full hearing?
Yeah, so I'm using the speech transmission index, which is sort of a frequency-weighted signal-to-noise ratio based on overall modulation in different bands, and I don't have to get into the details of that, but definitely depending on the algorithm, there you could imagine that there could be a more advanced machine learning technique that's maybe better than what is accounted for by this, which is a room acoustic metric based on human hearing. But it is certainly true as well that we know a lot that we don't only have hearing loss to our ears itself, but a lot of the noise exposure we have at high levels can also cause damage to the spiral ganglia in the auditory nerve, which is part of how our auditory system learns to make sense of noisy data. So if you're in a noisy environment, the neural processing along the auditory nerve is what allows you to filter out noise components and focus on a particular signal in the middle of noise. So you can have people that can still pass a normal hearing test in a silent background, but then they're not able to understand conversations very well. So there's that type of hearing loss as well, which would also not be accounted by the sort of naive STI, but that's what I'm using because it's a little bit simpler right now. But you could imagine a neural a neural sort of optimization function based on the completely subjective experience of someone with that type of hearing loss as well.
So I had a question about, you mentioned that we eventually hit an equilibrium. Party gets louder, we get louder, party gets louder, we get louder. What sets that equilibrium? Because why aren't we screaming? Like, we never seem to get there when we have the coffee breaks at these things. Like, what stops us from just yelling at the top of our lungs at each other?
Yeah, well, I think you reach a trade-off where in the literature we get to what's called declamatory speech. So it'd be very loud. You might define it as shouting. And I think last night at the cocktail party, I was talking about this loud, and the person I was talking to was not talking quite this loud, and I had quite a bit of trouble understanding them. The research on actual equivalent speech levels over long periods of time for untrained vocalists it's very difficult for us to do much more than, a scream might be, how many times have you screamed in your life, honestly? Like, officer, I'm being robbed, something like this. You save that for when you really need it. The Lombard effect, there's a little bit of headroom on top of that in general, but it depends on the social context as well, because I have been also in environments of maybe, 18 to 20-year-olds, and they're pushing the envelope quite a bit more, burning the candle at both ends with their voice, so to speak. But it's pretty loud in either case. To my old ears, anyway.
Thank you.
Yes.
We also have a question from one of our online viewers. You mentioned that regular interruptions can briefly reset the level of noise. Is that something that could be implemented in an automated way to prevent the Lombard effect?
I haven't encountered anyone doing it other than when I was in this particular party, because I had just given a speech as a sort of pedantic professorial type. I just stood right up and sort of explained it to people. I haven't been in too many environments where people have tried regular interruptions like this, and honestly, it was kind of a buzzkill for the party, because of course everyone's like, oh, and then they're a little distracted, and then they have to get back to their conversation. One of the things is continuity of topic as well. So if there's give and take, because we're talking about like average diffuse levels, but there's a little bit of give and take between people are talking and then they have to stop to breathe. Someone's talking, someone else is talking. This person's a little bit louder. This person's a little bit quieter. I could still have maybe moments where I can zoom in on your hearing and or on your speech, and I can understand a little bit of what you're talking about. And as long as I'm sort of staying tuned into your general topic, I'm able to use context to better predict what you're saying later, and use things like facial cues to better understand you. But if I completely lose you as well, or if it gets completely interrupted, or I get confused or distracted, then I might suddenly turn to you and have no idea what you're saying, because I don't even know what to expect. And remember, brain prediction is an important part of speech intelligibility as well. So it's a very complex, multidimensional problem when we're at the sort of granular level of exactly what's happening like that. So I don't know if conscious acoustic interruption is maybe the best solution for it, but it was just a particular solution that I saw tried one time. And as I said, over time it was still ineffective, because everyone would gradually forget about it, and you would only just continue introducing more energy into the system over time.
I guess you just imagine it'd have to be part of the event, so it's not just like a sound that happened because, say you're at a wedding and it's time for a toast, everyone knows what that means.
Yeah.
So we're all on the same page, but if it was just...
Yeah, I mean, something like speed dating or something like that, where you have it built organically into the function of the event, then maybe it would inhibit it somewhat just by the natural sort of shift in inertia. But if it's just an open-ended event, it might be more distracting.
It occurs to me there was a Seinfeld episode where Jerry was complaining about
the quiet talker,
the close talker.
The close talker. Oh yeah.
So I guess there are many different kinds of situations where you could ameliorate the effect by just getting closer to someone, but at some point you're almost kissing them, so you can't do that.
Yes.
But it just reminds me of how complicated it is to to talk to someone when you've got distractions.
Yeah, so interestingly, the one of the first papers on this, which is a very theoretical physicsy paper on the acoustics of cocktail parties from 1959, William McLean, he did this paper, but he assumes that the only reaction will be contraction of conversational radius, so everyone will keep getting closer to each other.
You don't have the accordion in the opposite way.
Well, he says, as you keep introducing more people into the party is getting going, it'll keep getting louder, and the conversations will keep getting tighter. And he makes some sort of predictions about the exact sort of slope at which it will start to get louder. And so far, the empirical data we actually have on cocktail parties does not bear that out. I mean, it does get louder over time, obviously with more people, but he made some specific predictions that don't seem to have been borne out. And some people I think are close talkers, and some people maybe are not. But I don't think that's a uniform rule across the board.
Well, thank you, Braxton. And thank you all again for joining us at the 183rd meeting of the Acoustical Society of America. Videos of this live stream will be available upon request, and our team is happy to connect you with any of the presenters if you have any questions. So please reach out to media@aip.org if that is the case. Thank you. Awesome. Great job.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.